the VP shouted, turning his back to her to hand his glass to a waiter. Elena felt that familiar sting in her chest. She did what she always did. She smiled politely, took a sip of her sparkling water, and stepped back. She felt small. She felt like the invisible woman again. She was the most reliable worker at her firm, yet here she was, disappearing in a room full of people. But then, she saw her. Across the room, standing by the railing, was a woman in a simple black silk dress. She wasn't talking much. She wasn't laughing loudly or trying to catch anyone's eye. She was just there. She held her glass with a relaxed grip. Her shoulders were down. She looked out at the Chicago skyline as if she owned the view. Two men approached her. Elena watched closely. They didn't talk over this woman. In fact, they seemed to lean in, waiting for her to speak. When she did say something, she didn't use a high bubbly networking voice. She spoke low and slow. She didn't move her hands much. She had a stillness that made the loud men around her look like frantic children. Elena realized that this woman wasn't playing by the good girl rules. She wasn't trying to be sweet. She was using a different kind of energy, a darker, more grounded magnetism. She wasn't asking for permission to be there. She had already granted it to herself. The obsidian mirror. To get where that woman was, Elena had to learn to look into the obsidian mirror. This isn't a regular mirror that shows you if your hair is straight. It is a metaphorical tool used to see the parts of yourself that society told you to hide. Most women are given a light mirror. This mirror only reflects the good traits, kindness, patience, and self-sacrifice. But the obsidian mirror is different. It is dark, deep, and honest. When you look into it, you see your ambition, the part of you that wants to win and lead. The part of you that knows when a boundary has been crossed. Sensuality, the part of you that enjoys being in your own body. Mystery, the part of you that doesn't need to explain yourself to anyone. The world fears a woman in her power because she has looked into this mirror and stopped being afraid of her own shadow. When you stop fearing your dark side, you stop being easy to control. You become unpredictable. In the 19th century, doctors were so afraid of women who showed these traits that they created a medical diagnosis for it: hysteria. If a woman was too angry, too sexual, or too independent, she was labeled sick. They used smelling salts and bed rest to try to calm her back into submission. They were trying to break her connection to her dark feminine energy. Even in the 1990s, we saw this same pattern. Think about how the media treated powerful women like Hillary Clinton or rock stars like Courtney Love. They were called ambitious, as if it were a dirty word. They were picked apart for being aggressive or difficult. This is just the modern version of the trial of Phryne. It is the world's way of saying, please go back to being small. You're making us uncomfortable. The male gaze versus the female gaze. A big part of why this fear exists is rooted in how we are seen. For a long time, the world has operated under the male gaze. This means that things, including women, are viewed as objects to be used, looked at, or controlled. Under this gaze, a woman's power is only allowed if it serves someone else. The female gaze, or the internal gaze, is the act of reclaiming your own perspective. It is the shift from asking, do they like me? To asking, do I like them? Or how do I feel in this room? When Phryne stood in that court, and her robe was pulled back, she shifted the gaze. She stopped being a defendant pleading for her life. She became a force of nature that the judges had to reckon with. She forced them to look at her as a whole being, not just a woman they could judge with their laws. You do this every time you refuse to play the good girl script. You do this when you stop over-explaining. You don't need to give 5 reasons why you said no. Hold eye contact. You don't look at the floor when a powerful person speaks to you. Take up physical space. You don't cross your legs and tuck your arms in to look smaller. The cost of the cage. We have to talk about the safety in smallness again, because there is a hidden cost to staying in that cage. While it might protect you from some criticism, it slowly drains your life force. When you suppress your dark feminine energy, your ice anger, and your raw desire, you don't just lose the bad stuff, you lose your magnetism. You become a faded version of yourself. This is why so many women feel burned out, even if they aren't working long hours. They are exhausted from the effort of keeping their true selves hidden. Modern studies on burnout show that it isn't just about too much work. It is often about a lack of agency. When you feel like you have no control over your environment, like Elena in that meeting, your brain stays in a state of high stress. Reclaiming your dark feminine energy is actually a health requirement. It is the only way to lower that stress and feel whole again. The power of the pause. One of the most effective ways to show this power without saying a word is through the pause. Think back to the woman Elena saw at the bar. She didn't rush to fill the silence. When someone spoke to her, she didn't nod her head frantically like she was a bobblehead doll. She listened, she paused, and then she responded. Silence is a tool of the dark feminine because it creates a void. Most people are terrified of silence. They will say anything to fill it. By holding a pause, you force the other person to reveal themselves. You become the observer, not the one being observed. This is a subtle way of banning the male gaze and establishing your own authority. The timeless echo. The trial of Friday happened over 2,000 years ago, but the echoes of that courtroom are still ringing today. You can hear them in every boardroom where a woman is told she is too sharp. You can hear them in every relationship where a woman is told she is too much work. But here is the secret that those judges in Athens didn't want anyone to know. The fear is a sign of your value. People don't try to suppress things that are weak. They don't build cages for things that are harmless. They build cages for lions. They build walls for oceans. If the world is trying to tell you to tone it down or be nicer, it is because they have glimpsed your obsidian mirror, and they know how powerful you truly are. The goal isn't to make the world stop being afraid. The goal is to stop letting their fear dictate your life. When Elena left that rooftop bar that night, she didn't feel like the invisible woman. She walked to the elevator, and when a man tried to rush in before the doors closed, she didn't step back and apologize for being in the way. She stood her ground. She made eye contact. She didn't smile. The man stopped. He stepped back. He waited. It was a small moment, a tiny trial in a metal box, but Elena had won. She had stopped asking for permission to exist in her own space. She was starting to understand that being dangerous to the status quo was the only way to be truly free. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a power to be realized. The world may fear the dark, but that is only because they don't know how to see in it. Chapter 3. 7 Archetypes of the Femme Fatale. Madame V lived in a house that smelled like old velvet and expensive perfume. She had been a stage actress in London 40 years ago, and she never let you forget it. Her back was always straight, her chin always high, and she moved as if she were walking through a palace, even when she was just heading to her kitchen to make tea. She didn't teach acting in the way most people think. She didn't care about memorizing lines or hitting marks on a floor. She taught presence. One rainy Tuesday, she sat me down in front of a giant, gold-rimmed mirror. She told me that most women spend their lives playing a character they didn't even audition for. You are playing the good girl because that is the script the world handed you at birth, she said, her voice like smooth gravel. But you have a whole wardrobe of other souls inside you. If you only wear one outfit, the others will start to rot. She explained that there isn't just one way to be a powerful woman. There are many. She called these archetypes. To Madame V, an archetype was like a costume for your spirit. It wasn't a lie. It was a part of you that was waiting for permission to come out and play. She taught me that when a woman feels stuck or invisible, it is usually because she is trying to solve a problem using the wrong part of herself. The lesson was simple. You cannot fight a war while wearing a ball gown, and you cannot win a heart while wearing armor. You have to know which version of the dark feminine is needed for the moment. The birth of the dangerous woman. In 1944, the world was a messy place. Men were returning from a long, terrible war to find that the world had changed. While they were away, women had stepped out of the kitchen and into the factories. They had earned their own money. They had made their own decisions. They had tasted a kind of freedom that didn't go away just because the war ended. Hollywood noticed this tension. The movie studios saw that the sweet girl next door didn't feel real anymore. Audiences wanted something darker, sharper, and more honest. This was the era of film noir. These movies were filled with shadows, rain-slicked streets, and a new kind of character, the femme fatale. The most famous of these was Barbara Stanwyck in the movie Double Indemnity. Before this role, Barbara was known for being a hard worker, but she wasn't seen as a powerhouse. She was just another actress in the system. But she knew that to become a legend, she had to step into a shadow archetype. In the film, she played Phyllis Dietrichson. She didn't scream or use a gun. She wore a fake blonde wig and a gold anklet that caught the light every time she walked. She used her voice, her stillness, and her mind to get exactly what she wanted. She was the seductress mixed with the outlaw. The studios were actually afraid of her. They wanted to make sure these dangerous women were punished at the end of the movie because they didn't want real women to get any ideas. But they failed. Even though the characters often met a tragic end, the audience didn't walk away thinking about the punishment. They walked away thinking about the power. They saw a woman who refused to be a victim, a woman who had a plan, and a woman who commanded the screen. Barbara Stanwyck's transformation showed the world that dark feminine energy wasn't about being evil. It was about agency. It was about the refusal to be a background character in someone else's story. In her small apartment in Chicago, Elena Vance stood in front of her open closet. The L train rattled her windows, but she didn't notice. For the first time in her life, she wasn't looking for something appropriate to wear. She was looking for a version of herself she had been hiding. Usually, Elena wore beige. She wore soft sweaters and sensible shoes. She wore clothes that said, "I am helpful, I am quiet, and I won't cause any trouble." This was the maiden archetype. It was safe, but it was also why her boss talked over her and why her ex-boyfriend thought he could come and go as he pleased. She pulled out a black silk blouse she had bought years ago, but never had the courage to wear. She put it on and felt the cool fabric against her skin. She unbuttoned the top button. She put on a pair of boots with a sharp heel. She looked at her reflection. She didn't look like Elena the project manager. She looked like someone who had secrets. She looked like someone who didn't need to explain herself. She realized she had been starving the queen and the seductress inside her for 32 years. She wasn't trying to trick anyone. She was finally admitting that she wasn't just a good girl. She was many things at once. As she stood there, she felt a strange electric hum in her chest. It was the feeling of a closed door finally swinging open. The 7 faces of power. To step into your magnetism, you have to understand the wardrobe available to you. Each of these 7 archetypes represents a different way that dark feminine energy moves through the world. You likely have 1 or 2 that feel like home, and others that feel scary or foreign. The siren. The siren is the master of the call. In ancient myths, sirens were creatures whose voices were so beautiful that sailors would crash their ships just to get closer. In the modern world, the siren is about the power of attraction. She doesn't chase. She lures. She uses her voice, her eye contact, and her mystery to make others come to her. Her shadow side is the fear of being too much, but her strength is her ability to command attention without lifting a finger. The queen. The queen is the archetype of sovereignty and boundaries. She doesn't ask for respect, she assumes it. She is the one who says no, without feeling the need to apologize. Think of Queen Elizabeth I, who told her advisors that she would be mistress of her own house. The queen's power is in her posture and her standards. She knows her worth, and she expects the world to meet her there. The huntress. The huntress is the spirit of independence and focus. She is modeled after Artemis, the goddess of the wild. She doesn't need a partner or a crowd to feel whole. She has a goal and she moves toward it with total precision. This archetype is perfect for women who are building a career or a life on their own terms. She is fiercely protective of her freedom. The mystic. The mystic is the keeper of intuition and the unseen. She is the one who trusts her gut over a spreadsheet. She understands that not everything can be explained with logic. She is comfortable with silence and the dark. Like the Oracle of Delphi, she sees things others miss because she is looking beneath the surface. Her power is her depth. The sage. The sage is the master of knowledge and observation. She is the woman who listens more than she talks. She gathers information like a spy. She knows that knowledge is the ultimate leverage. When she does speak, people stop and listen because her words are surgical. She uses her mind as her primary tool for navigating the world. The seductress. The seductress is the embodiment of raw sensuality and presence. This isn't just about sex. It's about being fully alive in your own skin. She enjoys her own beauty and pleasure for herself first. She moves with a fluid grace that makes people want to be in her orbit. She is the obsidian mirror, reflecting back what people want to see while keeping her true self safe. The outlaw. The outlaw is the rule breaker. She is the one who sees a keep out sign and walks right past it. She doesn't care about the way things have always been done. She is the rebel, the pioneer, and the disruptor. She is the energy of Lilith, refusing to submit to a life that feels too small. Her power is her courage to be disliked. The insight: you are a prism. For a long time, women were told they had to be one thing. You were either a mother or a vamp. You were either smart or pretty. You were either sweet or difficult. But the dark feminine teaches us that you are a prism. A prism looks clear, but when the light hits it at the right angle, it reveals a whole rainbow of colors. You are not acting when you step into the queen archetype to ask for a raise. You are not faking it when you step into the siren archetype on a date. You are simply turning the prism. The aha moment for most women comes when they realize that anger is just the huntress protecting her territory. Lust is just the seductress celebrating her life. Silence is just the sage gathering data. When you stop judging these parts of yourself, they stop being scary. They become tools. You begin to realize that the world has been trying to keep you in a maiden box because a woman who can switch archetypes is impossible to control. She is unpredictable. She is magnetic. She is free. The practical path to discovery. How do you know which archetype is calling to you? It usually starts with a feeling of envy or fear. If you see a woman who is incredibly bold and it makes you feel annoyed, that is usually your inner outlaw crying out for attention. If you see a woman who is very sensual and it makes you feel judgmental, that is often your inner seductress being suppressed by shame. You can begin to awaken these parts of yourself through small, daily experiments. The voice test. Try lowering the pitch of your voice by just a tiny bit when you speak. This is a sage and queen technique. Notice how people listen differently when you speak with more weight in your chest. The space test. The next time you are in a meeting or at a dinner, take up more physical space. Don't cross your legs tightly or tuck your arms in. Rest your arms on the chair. Lean back. This is the queen and huntress claiming territory. The gaze test. Practice looking at someone for 2 seconds longer than is polite. Don't look away first. This is the siren and mystic, testing the energy of the room. The transformation of Barbara. Remember Barbara Stanwyck. She wasn't born a femme fatale. She was a girl from Brooklyn who had a hard life and worked her way up. She chose to play Phyllis Dietrichson because she knew that the good girl roles were a dead end. She took a risk. She wore a wig that people said looked cheap. She played a character that people said was unlikable. But by doing so, she became one of the highest paid women in America. She proved that when a woman embraces her dark side, she doesn't lose her soul, she finds her power. She didn't just play the role on camera. She took that queen and sage energy into her real life. She negotiated her own contracts. She ran her own career. She refused to be pushed around by the men who ran the studios. She integrated the dark feminine until it wasn't a costume anymore. Your archetype assessment. Look at the 7 archetypes again. Which one makes you feel the most uncomfortable? Which one makes you feel a secret spark of excitement? The stifled one. This is the archetype you have been told is bad or dangerous. For many, this is the seductress or the outlaw. This is where your greatest hidden power lies. The mask. This is the archetype you use to survive. For many, this is the maiden or the sage. It's what you use to keep people happy. The hunger. This is the archetype you dream about being. Maybe you see movies about the queen and wish you could stand that tall. Healing starts by giving the stifled one a voice. You don't have to change your whole life overnight. You just have to let her out for a walk. Elena Vance did this by changing her clothes. She did it by stopping her "I'm sorry" habit. She did it by realizing that she wasn't mean for having boundaries. She was just being the queen. She started to see that the more she embraced her dark side, the more the light parts of her life, her creativity, her joy, her friendships, actually began to flourish. The good girl isn't a whole person. She is a fragment. To be whole, you must be willing to be the outlaw when the rules are unfair. You must be the huntress when your goals are at stake. You must be the siren when you want to be seen. You have the wardrobe. You have the stage. The only question is, which part of yourself are you going to invite into the light today? But even with the right costume and the right voice, there is one thing that can stop a woman in her tracks. It is the one thing that even the most powerful queen or the most alluring siren has to face eventually. It is the thing that destroyed many women before they could finish their transformation. If you have the mask and you have the power, how do you handle the moment when the world realizes you are no longer playing by their rules? What happens when the world tries to take your new power away? To answer that, we have to look at a woman who didn't just play a character on a screen. She lived a character so well that the entire world forgot who she actually was. She became a legend, but she also learned that every mask comes with a price. How far are you willing to go to keep the version of yourself you just discovered? Chapter 4. The night Margaretha Zell became Mata Hari. Margaretha Zell's breath hitched as she heard the murmurs of the Parisian elite on the other side of the silk curtain. It was March 13, 1905, and she was standing in the shadows of the Musée Guimet. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage of bronze and beads. She was 30 years old, she was penniless, and she was a mother who had lost everything. If this night failed, she would be back on the cold streets of Paris with nothing but a suitcase full of lies. If she succeeded, she would never have to be Margaretha Zell again. She stepped out into the light, and the room went silent. She wasn't wearing the modest wool dress of a struggling divorcee. Instead, she wore a jeweled headpiece and translucent veils that shimmered like dragonflies. She didn't walk like a woman who had been beaten down by a cruel husband, or a society that looked down on used women. She moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator. The audience didn't see a desperate woman from the Netherlands. They saw a princess from the East. They saw a woman who had been raised in sacred temples and taught the secrets of ancient gods. This was the night Mata Hari was born. The name meant Eye of the Day, and for the first time in her life, the world was looking at her exactly how she wanted to be seen. The death of the small self. Before she became a legend, Margaretha was a woman the world had tried to erase. Her life had been a series of closed doors. She had married a man who was twice her age, hoping for a life of adventure in the East Indies. Instead, she found a life of violence and grief. Her husband was an alcoholic who took his anger out on her. One of her children died under mysterious circumstances. When she finally gathered the courage to leave and return to Europe, she was met with cold shoulders. In 1905, a woman without a husband or a father to protect her was seen as a tragedy or a threat. Margaretha realized a hard truth that many of us face today. If you stay the person everyone expects you to be, you will be crushed by their expectations. She had been the good wife, and it had nearly killed her. She had been the grieving mother, and it had left her hollow. She was tired of being a character in someone else's sad story. She decided to stop asking for a seat at the table and decided to build her own room. She knew that the people of Paris were bored. They wanted mystery. They wanted something exotic. They wanted a fantasy they could believe in. Margaretha didn't just give them a dance. She gave them a new reality. She told everyone she was born on the coast of South India. She said she was the daughter of a priestess. She told these lies so often and with such fire in her eyes that even she began to believe them. This wasn't about being a liar in the way we usually think about it. It was about narrative control. It was about realizing that her past did not have to be her prison. She took the poisoned apple of her trauma, the pain, the shame, and the poverty, and she threw it away. In its place, she picked up a mask. This mask wasn't meant to hide her true self. It was meant to protect her true self, so it could finally grow. The power of the social mask. We are often told that we must be authentic at all times. We are told that having a different version of ourselves for different situations is being fake. But there is a huge difference between being a fake person and using a social mask. A mask is a tool. It is a piece of armor you put on when you go into battle. Think about the way you act when you are at a funeral versus the way you act at a birthday party. You aren't being fake at the funeral. You are simply showing the part of you that fits the moment. Dark feminine energy understands that the world is a stage. If you walk onto that stage without a costume, you are vulnerable. If you walk out and show everyone your deepest wounds and your softest spots, you give them the power to hurt you. Mata Hari used her mask to create distance. By becoming a mysterious princess, she became untouchable. People couldn't judge Margaretha Zell, because Margaretha Zell no longer existed to them. They could only react to the goddess she presented. This is the reinvention protocol. It is the act of deciding which parts of yourself the world is allowed to see and which parts you keep for yourself. When you use a mask, you stop being a victim of your circumstances. You become the director of your life. You decide the lighting, the script, and the ending. You realize that your personality isn't a stone statue that can never change. It is more like a set of clothes. You can take off the quiet girl outfit. You can put away the people-pleaser shoes. You can choose to wear the authority suit or the seductress gown whenever you need to. Elena shifted in the mirror. In a cold, fluorescent-lit bathroom in a Chicago office building, Elena Vance looked at her reflection. For years, this mirror had shown her a woman who looked tired. It showed a woman who wore beige sweaters because she didn't want to stand out. It showed a woman who kept her hair in a tight, sensible bun, so no one would think she was unprofessional. Elena was 32, and she felt like she was disappearing. Earlier that morning, her boss had handed a big project to a man who had been at the company for 6 months less than her. He didn't have her data, he didn't have her experience, but he had the look of a leader. He spoke with a loud voice and took up space. Elena had just smiled and said, "I'm happy to help him if he needs it." She felt a hot flash of anger in her chest. It was the ice anger she had been learning about. She realized she had been feeding herself the poisoned apple of being helpful for far too long. She reached into her bag and pulled out a tube of lipstick. It wasn't the soft pink she usually wore. It was a deep, blood red. As she swiped it across her lips, she felt a strange shift in her posture. Her shoulders dropped. Her chin tilted up. She took her hair out of the bun and let it fall around her shoulders. She looked at herself and didn't see helpful Elena anymore. She saw someone she didn't quite recognize, but someone she liked very much. She practiced her walk in the narrow space between the sinks and the stalls. Usually she scurried. She moved like she was trying to avoid bumping into the air itself. She slowed down. She felt the weight of her heels hit the tile. Click, click, click. It was a rhythmic, steady sound. It was the sound of someone who wasn't in a hurry, because everyone else would wait for her. She walked into the 2 p.m. meeting 5 minutes after it started. Old Elena would have hurried in, whispering, "I'm so sorry," to anyone who looked her way. This Elena didn't say a word. She opened the door, walked to the only empty chair at the center of the table, and sat down. She didn't apologize, she didn't explain. She simply opened her notebook and looked at her boss with a steady, unflinching gaze. The room felt different. The air felt thicker. Her boss stopped talking for a second, his eyes lingering on her red lips and her calm face. He didn't ask why she was late. He actually cleared his throat and said, "Elena, we were just getting to the data section. I'd love your input." She hadn't changed her brain. She hadn't changed her resume. She had simply changed her mask. And the world immediately changed its response to her. The art of the narrative, Mata Hari, wasn't the only one who understood this. History is full of people who realized that the truth of who they were was less important than the story they told. Think about a young woman named Gabrielle. She was an orphan who grew up in a strict convent. She was poor, she was plain, and she had no future. But she didn't stay Gabrielle the orphan. She became Coco Chanel. She didn't hide her past because she was ashamed. She hid it because it didn't fit the brand of elegance she was building. She created a narrative of being a woman of high society. And by the time anyone found out the truth, she had already changed the world of fashion forever. Then there was a young man named David Jones. He was a talented musician, but he was shy. He struggled to connect with audiences. So he stopped trying to be David Jones. He created a character named Ziggy Stardust. He put on lightning bolt makeup and space-age clothes. By wearing a mask, he was able to say and do things he never would have dared to do as himself. He used the character to explore the wildest parts of his mind. This is the secret of the femme fatale. She knows that herself is a work of art. She doesn't wait for someone to tell her who she is. She tells the world who she is. She understands that if you don't define yourself, other people will do it for you. And they will usually define you in a way that makes you easy to manage. They will call you nice, reliable, or sweet. Those aren't compliments, they are cages. The reinvention protocol. How to shed your skin. Reinvention isn't about lying. It is about selection. It is about looking at the vast library of your life and deciding which books you want to put on the front shelf. You have a dark side that is powerful, ambitious, and sensual. You have a light side that is kind, nurturing, and soft. For most of your life, you have probably been told to hide the dark and only show the light. To reclaim your power, you must learn to bring the dark forward when you need it. You can start this process tonight. You don't need to move to Paris or change your name to Mata Hari. You just need to follow the protocol of intentional self-creation. Audit your current story. Look at the way you describe yourself to others. Do you say things like, "I'm just a stay-at-home mom," or "I'm just a junior designer"? Do you lead with your weaknesses? Write down the story you currently tell the world. See where it sounds small or apologetic. Identify the poisoned parts. Which parts of your identity were given to you by someone else? Did a teacher tell you that you weren't leader material? Did an ex-boyfriend tell you that you were too loud? These are the poisoned apples. They are not truths. They are opinions you have swallowed. It is time to spit them out. Draft your new narrative. If you could be any version of yourself tomorrow, who would she be? Don't think about what is realistic. Think about what feels powerful. How does she dress? How does she speak? What does she value? This is your Matahari persona. Create a physical anchor. Every mask needs a physical trigger. For Matahari, it was her veils. For Elena, it was her red lipstick. For you, it might be a specific perfume, a piece of jewelry, or a pair of boots. This item is your signal to your brain that the persona is now in charge. Test the mask in small batches. You don't have to debut your new self at a huge gala. Try it out at the grocery store. Walk through the aisles with the posture of a queen. Go to a coffee shop and order your drink without saying thank you 3 times in a row. See how it feels to occupy space without apologizing for it. The social mask is a tool, not a lie. Some people will tell you that this sounds like faking it until you make it. But that is a shallow way to look at a deep psychological truth. You aren't faking anything. You are uncovering a version of yourself that has been buried under layers of social conditioning. When Margaretha Zell became Matahari, she didn't lose her soul. She found a way to let her soul breathe. The good girl Margaretha was the fake one. She was the one who was performing for a husband who didn't love her, and a society that didn't value her. The femme fatale Matahari was the real one. She was the one who was brave enough to claim her own desires and her own worth. Your mask is your protection. It allows you to walk through the world with a sense of mystery. When you don't tell everyone everything about yourself, you become a magnet. People are drawn to what they cannot fully see. By maintaining a bit of selective silence, which we will talk about later, and a strong social mask, you force people to treat you with respect. They don't know your weaknesses, so they cannot exploit them. They only know the power you project. The cost of the old self. We must acknowledge that staying the old you has a very high price. If Margaretha had stayed in her home country, trying to be a respectable woman, she likely would have lived a life of quiet desperation. She would have been an object of pity. She would have been the poor woman who lost her children and her husband. By choosing to reinvent herself, she chose adventure. She chose wealth. She chose to be the most famous woman in the world for a decade. She chose to live on her own terms. Yes, her story ended in tragedy, which we will explore in a future chapter. But for a long time, she was the master of her own fate. Most of us aren't facing a firing squad. Our stakes are different, but they are just as real. The death we face is the death of our potential. It is the slow rot of resentment that comes from never being seen for who we really are. It is the exhaustion of being the invisible woman in our own lives. Reinvention is an act of mercy for your future self. It is saying, I refuse to let the first chapter of my life dictate the ending. You have the stage. You have the costume. The only thing stopping you from stepping out from behind the curtain is the fear that you aren't allowed to change. But here's the secret. No one is going to give you permission. No one is going to hand you a crown and say, you are now a queen. You have to walk into the room and act like the crown is already on your head. You have to believe in your own story so deeply that the rest of the world has no choice but to believe it too. Think about the way you introduced yourself the last time you met someone new. Did you sound like someone who was proud of their life? Or did you sound like you were apologizing for taking up their time? If you were to walk into a room today and absolutely no one knew your name, your past, or your mistakes, who would you choose to be? What is the one thing you have always wanted to do, but felt was too much for the person you are supposed to be? The curtain is about to rise. The audience is waiting. Are you going to give them the same old sad story? Or are you ready to become the eye of the day? Chapter 5. Inner Child Healing, Mending the Broken Foundation. Anna Freud spent most of her life in the shadow of a giant. Her father, Sigmund, was the man who changed how the whole world thought about the human mind. In their home in Vienna, the air was thick with big ideas and heavy books. Anna was the youngest of 6 children, and she often felt like she was the one who didn't quite fit. She wasn't the loudest or the most brilliant in the way her father expected. She was a quiet observer. She spent her time watching how people treated each other, especially how adults treated children. She never planned to start a revolution, She didn't want to be a famous doctor or a world leader. She simply wanted to understand why children seemed to lose their spark as they grew up. She watched the way a toddler would scream for what they wanted, with no shame at all. Then she watched how those same children, just a few years later, would sit quietly with their hands folded, eyes cast down, trying very hard to be good. Anna realized that these children were performing a magic trick. To keep their parents' love, they were making parts of themselves disappear. If a little girl was told that being angry was ugly, she buried her anger deep in the basement of her mind. If she was told that being loud was too much, she turned her voice down until it was almost a whisper. Anna saw that these children were building their lives on a broken foundation. They were trading their true selves for a slice of what she called the poisoned apple, the sweet, shiny lie that says you are only worthy of love when you are perfect and pleasing. During the 1920s and 30s, Anna worked in clinics and eventually opened a nursery for children who had lost everything during the war. These children were the ultimate test of her ideas. They were scared and alone. She noticed that the ones who recovered the fastest were the ones who were allowed to be messy. They were the ones who were allowed to be angry at the world for what had happened to them. She proved that you cannot build a strong adult on top of a child who was never allowed to be whole. You have to go back and fix the foundation. You have to find that little girl in the basement and tell her it is finally safe to come out. The ghost rules in your head. Most of us walk around with a set of ghost rules. These are the things we learned before we could even tie our own shoes. They are the voices of parents, teachers, and neighbors that told us what a good girl looks like. The problem is that these rules were never meant to make you powerful. They were meant to make you manageable. When you were 5 years old, you might have learned that if you were quiet, your mom was less stressed. You learned that if you got good grades, your dad looked at you with pride. You started to believe that your only job was to make the adults around you feel okay. This is how the invisible woman is born. She is a master at reading the room. She knows exactly what everyone else needs, but she has no idea what she wants for lunch. Healing your inner child is about looking at these ghost rules and realizing they are out of date. You are not 5 years old anymore. You do not need to be manageable to survive. In fact, the very things you were told to hide, your loud laugh, your sharp mind, your big anger, are the keys to your power. These are the parts of your foundation that were left out. To be a whole person, you have to go back and pick them up. Elena Vance sat at her mother's kitchen table in Chicago, the smell of roast chicken filling the air. This was supposed to be a nice Sunday dinner, but Elena felt like she was wearing a costume that was 2 sizes too small. She was 32 years old, a manager at a tech firm, and she lived in her own apartment. But the moment she stepped through this front door, she felt like she was 8 again. "You look tired, Elena," her mother said, setting a bowl of potatoes on the table. "And your hair is so dark. It makes you look a bit harsh. Why don't you wear that pink sweater I bought you?" Elena felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Usually she would smile and say, "I know, Mom, I'll try to get more sleep." She would take the poisoned apple of her mother's advice and eat it just to keep the peace. She would shrink herself down so her mother wouldn't feel uncomfortable with her success or her new, bolder style. "I like the way I look, Mom," Elena said. Her voice was calm, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. Her mother froze, a serving spoon halfway to a plate. Elena saw it. She saw the cycle. Her mother wasn't just criticizing her. Her mother was protecting the same ghost rules she had lived by her whole life. Her mother had been the good girl for 60 years. Seeing Elena break those rules felt like a threat to the world her mother had built. Elena realized that her niceness wasn't a choice she was making. It was a habit she had picked up to keep her mother happy. She was still eating the apple, even though it was making her sick. The toolkit for a new foundation. Fixing your foundation isn't about blaming your parents. It is about taking back the job of raising yourself. You are the only person who can give that inner child the permission she never got. This is a practical process. It requires you to act differently in small ways every single day. 1. Identifying the should list. The first tool is awareness. You cannot change a rule if you don't know it exists. For the next 3 days, pay attention to every time the word should pops into your head. I should help my coworker with her project, even though I'm buried in work. I should smile more so people don't think I'm mean. I should say yes to this date, even though I'm tired. Write these down. Every time you find a should, ask yourself, who told me this? Most of the time, it isn't your own voice, it's a ghost. Once you see the rule for what it is, a piece of old training, You can decide if it actually helps you or if it's just taking up space. 2. The golden child versus the scapegoat. In most families, children take on roles to help the family survive. The golden child is the one who has to be perfect. She gets the good grades and never causes trouble. Her foundation is built on the fear of failure. If she isn't the best, she feels invisible. Your work is to practice being bad. Do something poorly on purpose. Be late. Let someone see you with messy hair. Prove to yourself that the world doesn't end when you aren't perfect. The scapegoat is the one who gets blamed for everything. She is the difficult one, or the rebel. Her foundation is built on the feeling of being wrong or broken. If this is you, your work is to realize that your rebellion was actually a sign of strength. You refuse to eat the poisoned apple. Your darkness isn't a flaw, it's your shield. You don't need to be fixed. You just need to stop believing the labels other people put on you. 3. Reparenting the shadow. This is the core of the work. Reparenting means talking to yourself the way a truly loving, powerful protector would. When you feel that old good girl fear creep up, that feeling of wanting to apologize for just being in the room, imagine that little version of you is standing right there. She is scared she's going to get in trouble. She thinks she has to be sweet to be safe. Your job as the adult is to step in front of her. Tell her, I've got this. You don't have to be sweet today. You can be angry. You can be loud. I will protect you no matter what. This changes your brain chemistry. You stop seeking validation from the person across from you and start giving it to yourself. You become your own source of safety. Creating a shadow space. In the 1930s, Anna Freud noticed that children needed a place where the rules didn't apply. They needed a playroom where they could throw things, make a mess, and act out their fears. You need this too. Create a shadow space in your life. This can be a physical corner of your room or just 15 minutes in your car. In this space, there are no ghost rules. You can scream into a pillow. You can write down all the mean things you want to say to your boss. You can dance like a wild animal. This isn't about being productive. It's about letting the parts of you that have been in the basement finally breathe. When you let the shadow out in a safe place, it doesn't have to explode in your real life. The truth about the poisoned apple. The world tells women that being sweet is their greatest asset. They call it being kind, but often it's just being compliant. Think about the story of Snow White. She was the most beautiful, the most helpful, and the most gentle. And what did it get her? She ate a poisoned apple and fell into a deep sleep, waiting for someone else to save her. Many women are living in that same sleep. They are waiting for a promotion to be given to them. They are waiting for a partner to finally see how much they do. They are waiting for permission to be happy. Waking up means throwing away the apple. It means realizing that being sweet was a survival strategy for a child, but it is a prison for a woman. Your dark feminine energy is the part of you that woke up. She is the one who realized the apple was toxic. She is the one who is tired of being good and is ready to be real. Mending the cracks. Anna Freud once said that a child's mind is like a piece of soft clay. Every touch leaves a mark. By the time we are adults, that clay has hardened. If the marks left on us were ones of shame or fear, we feel brittle. We feel like if we show our true selves, we will crack and break. But there is a secret to hardened clay. If you add enough heat and enough pressure, it doesn't just stay hard, it becomes stone. It becomes something that can't be easily broken. Your shadow work is the fire. The process of looking at your childhood, facing your anger, and reclaiming your desires is what turns your brittle good girl shell into an unshakable foundation. Elena Vance realized this as she drove home from her mother's house. She didn't feel guilty for standing her ground. She felt solid. She realized that she had been trying to build a career and a life on a foundation of, I'm sorry. No wonder she felt tired. You can't build a skyscraper on a pile of apologies. She spent that night in her apartment, not journaling about her goals or her to-do list, but talking to that 8-year-old version of herself. She told her that the pink sweater was gone. She told her that she didn't have to be the one to carry the potatoes anymore. She told her she was allowed to be the most powerful person in any room she walked into. The power of being too much. One of the most common ghost rules is the fear of being too much. Too loud. Too ambitious. Too sexual. too angry. When you hear that voice, remember where it came from. It came from people who were afraid of your power. A child who is too much is hard to control. A woman who is too much is impossible to ignore. Healing your inner child means taking that too much and making it your home. It means realizing that the parts of you that were labeled bad were actually just your most potent energy. When you mend the foundation, you aren't trying to become a better person. You are trying to become the person you were before the world told you who to be. Moving beyond the mirror. We often think of healing as something we do in our heads. We think if we just understand our past, we will be better. But your inner child doesn't live in your thoughts. She lives in your body. She is the tightness in your throat when you want to say no. She is the fluttering in your stomach when you walk into a meeting. To heal her, you have to move. You have to use your body to show her that things have changed. If you were told to be still, go for a run. If you were told to be quiet, sing at the top of your lungs in the shower. If you were told to be modest, look at yourself in the mirror and admire the strength in your legs and the fire in your eyes. Every time you act in a way that breaks a ghost rule, you are mending a crack in your foundation. You are proving to your nervous system that you are safe. You are showing that little girl that she doesn't have to hide anymore. You are the protector she always wanted. Your first act of rebellion. The dark feminine isn't a mask you put on. It is the truth that was always underneath. It is the raw, wild self that survived the poisoned apple. It is the part of you that knows you are a queen, even if you've been living like a servant. The foundation is almost ready. You have identified the rules. You have seen the roles you were forced to play. You have started the process of reparenting your shadow. Now it is time to put it into practice. You don't need a grand plan to start. You just need one moment of truth. One moment where you choose yourself over the expectations of others. One moment where you refuse the apple and reach for the wild fruit instead. Today you are going to do something bad. You are going to break a ghost rule on purpose. This isn't about hurting anyone. It's about freeing yourself. It's about showing your inner child that the world doesn't fall apart when she stops being perfect. Go to the store or look online. Find one thing that your parents or your good girl self would never have allowed you to have. Maybe it's a piece of clothing that is too bold. Maybe it's a book on a topic you were told was sinful or weird. Maybe it's a decadent dessert that you usually deny yourself because you're being good. Buy it, own it. Do not apologize for it. Do not explain it to anyone. Say to yourself, I am the one who makes the rules now. This is your first brick in your new foundation. It is small, but it is solid. And on top of it, you are going to build a life that no one can ever take away from you. Chapter 6. Mastering the Art of Selective Silence. I am aware of all that is being said. I say nothing. The words came from a man dressed in simple, dusty gray robes. He stood in the corner of a room filled with the most powerful people in 17th century France. Gold dripped from the walls. Men in silk capes whispered about wars, taxes, and who was sleeping with whom. They all looked at the man in the gray robes with a mix of fear and confusion. This was Father Joseph, the right-hand man to Cardinal Richelieu, the most powerful person in the country. Father Joseph didn't have a crown. He didn't have a title that sounded like a trumpet blast. People called him the Gray Eminence. He was the secret power behind the throne, and his greatest weapon was something most people are terrified of. He was silent. While everyone else in the French court was busy trying to prove how smart they were, Father Joseph just watched. He listened. If someone tried to insult him, he didn't snap back. He let the insult hang in the air like a bad smell until the person who said it felt embarrassed. If a spy tried to trick him into giving away a secret, Joseph would simply wait. He wouldn't say yes, and he wouldn't say no. He would just look at them with calm, steady eyes. Because he didn't speak, people assumed he knew everything. Because he didn't explain himself, people filled the silence with their own fears. They told him their secrets just to stop the quiet from feeling so heavy. Richelieu and Joseph ran an entire empire not by shouting the loudest, but by knowing exactly when to shut their mouths. They understood that the person who speaks the most is usually the person with the least power. The cost of being helpful. Most of us were raised to be the opposite of Father Joseph. We were taught that being a good girl means being a chatty girl. We were told that we should make people feel comfortable. If there is a quiet moment at a dinner table, we feel like it is our job to fix it. We ask a question. We tell a funny story. We apologize for things that aren't our fault, just to keep the peace. This is the poisoned apple of sweetness. We think we are being nice, but we are actually leaking our power. When you feel the need to fill every silence, you are telling the world that you are nervous. You are telling them that their comfort is more important than your peace. You are basically saying, please like me, look how much effort I am making. The dark feminine doesn't make an effort to be liked. She is the mountain. The mountain doesn't move to make you feel better. It just stands there. If you want to talk to the mountain, you have to climb it. If you want to hear what the mountain has to say, you have to be quiet enough to listen. Elena and the longest 3 seconds. Elena sat across from Mark at a dimly lit cocktail bar. This was the part of the night where her brain would start working overtime. Mark was talking about his job in software sales. He was going on and on about metrics and quarterly goals. In the past, Elena would have leaned forward. She would have nodded her head until her neck hurt. She would have said things like, "Oh, wow, that sounds so challenging. How did you handle that?" She would have been the perfect audience, making sure Mark felt like the most interesting man in Chicago. But tonight, Elena felt different. She remembered the gray eminence. She remembered that she didn't owe Mark her energy just because he was talking. Mark finished a long sentence about a pivot in the market and took a sip of his drink. He looked at Elena, waiting for her to jump in and keep the ball rolling. Elena didn't jump. She took a slow breath. She didn't look away. She didn't reach for her phone. She just looked at him with a small, calm smile. 1 second passed. Mark's smile faltered. 2 seconds passed. Mark shifted in his chair. 3 seconds passed. Mark cleared his throat. "Anyway," Mark said, his voice a little higher than before. "I've been talking about myself way too much. What about you? I feel like I don't know anything about what you actually do." Elena felt a tiny spark of heat in her chest. For the first time in 5 years of dating, she wasn't the one doing the work. By simply staying silent, she had forced Mark to work for her attention. She hadn't been mean. She hadn't been cold. She had just been still. And in that stillness, she became the most interesting thing in the room. Why we are afraid of the quiet. If silence is so powerful, why do we hate it? Most of us have a good girl script running in our heads. This script says that silence is a sign of failure. We think if we aren't talking, people will think we are boring or mean or that we don't have anything to say. We use words like a shield. We think that as long as we are talking, people can't see the real us, the parts of us we think are messy or not enough. This is where the troubleshooting begins. When you start practicing selective silence, your brain is going to scream at you. It's going to tell you that you're being rude. Here is how you handle the common traps. Trap 1. The panic talk. This happens when the silence gets too long and you suddenly blurt out something embarrassing just to stop the quiet. The fix. When you feel the urge to speak, press your tongue against the roof of your mouth. Take 1 deep breath through your nose. Remind yourself, I am not the host of this conversation. I am the prize. Trap 2. The cold shoulder. Sometimes people try to be silent, but they end up looking angry or bored. This isn't dark feminine energy. It's just being a jerk. The fix. Use active silence. This means you are still present. You are looking at the person. You are listening. You just aren't offering words. Think of yourself like a high-end art gallery. The gallery is quiet, but it's full of expensive, beautiful things. It doesn't need to shout to show its value. Trap 3. The what's wrong question. If you are usually a chatty Cathy and you suddenly become silent, people might ask if you are okay or if you are mad. The fix. Don't over-explain. Don't say, "Oh, I'm just reading this book about dark feminine energy and it told me to be quiet." That kills the mystery. Instead, just smile and say, "I'm great. I'm just enjoying the moment." Then, go back to being quiet. The Greta Garbo effect. In the 1930s, Hollywood was full of stars who wanted to be seen everywhere. They went to every party. They talked to every reporter. And then there was Greta Garbo. Garbo was one of the biggest movie stars in the world, but she became famous for one thing. She didn't want to play the game. I want to be alone. She didn't give interviews. She didn't sign autographs. When she moved through a room, she didn't chatter. She stayed in the shadows. Because she was so mysterious, her value went through the roof. People went crazy trying to figure her out. Magazines would pay thousands of dollars just for a photo of her walking down the street. Because she withheld her energy, she became a legend. This is the psychology of the void. Humans are built to want to fill gaps. If a book has a missing page, you want to know what was on it. If a person is a bit of a mystery, you want to know their secrets. When you talk all the time, you are an open book. There is no mystery. There is no reason for anyone to lean in. When you use selective silence, you are creating a void. You are giving people a space that they feel a natural urge to fill. Most of the time, they will fill it by trying to impress you, by being more honest, or by giving you more respect. The 70-30 rule. So how do you actually do this without sounding like a robot? You use the 70-30 rule. In any interaction, a date, a business meeting, or a talk with a friend, your goal is to listen 70% of the time and speak only 30% of the time. When you do speak, your words should be like high-quality jewelry. Few, but valuable. Don't use filler words. Stop saying like, and I mean. Stop apologizing for your opinions. If someone asks you a question, answer it directly. Then stop. Don't feel the need to add 3 more sentences to soften the answer. If your boss asks, "Can you have this report done by Friday?" The good girl says, "Oh, Friday? Let me see. I have a lot on my plate, and I have that dentist appointment, but I think I can probably swing it if I stay late on Thursday. Is that okay? Does that work for you?" The dark feminine says, "Yes, I'll have it to you by 4 p.m. The second answer is shorter, but it carries 10 times more power. It shows that you are in control of your time and your work. It doesn't ask for permission to exist. The lean back technique. Silence isn't just about your mouth. It's about your body. Think about how a predator moves in the wild. A lion doesn't pace around nervously, making noise. A lion sits perfectly still in the tall grass. It watches. It waits. It only moves when it has a reason. Most women are taught to lean in. We lean forward to show we are listening. We tilt our heads to look friendly. We move our hands a lot. All of this movement uses up energy and makes us look like we are trying. The lean back is a physical way to use silence. When someone is talking to you, sit back in your chair. Let your shoulders drop. Keep your hands still. When you are the one speaking, don't lean forward to see if they like what you're saying. Stay in your own space. When you lean back, you are telling the other person's subconscious mind, "I am the center of my own world. You are a guest here. I am comfortable exactly where I am." This is incredibly magnetic. People are drawn to people who are comfortable in their own skin. By being silent and still, you are showing the world that you don't need their applause to feel okay. Handling the bullies. What happens when someone tries to use silence against you? We've all dealt with the silent treatment. This is when someone ignores you to make you feel small or to punish you. A good girl reacts to the silent treatment by chasing. She sends 10 text messages. She asks, "What did I do wrong?" She begs for the silence to stop. A woman in her dark feminine energy knows that you can't be punished with silence if you actually enjoy silence. If someone stops talking to you to punish you, let them. Don't chase. Don't explain. Don't beg. Use that time to focus on yourself. Go for a walk. Read a book. When they realize that their silence isn't hurting you, they lose their power. They will eventually come back to you, and when they do, they will realize that you are the one who is unshakable. The power of the pause. There is one specific type of silence that can change your life tomorrow. The strategic pause. The next time someone asks you a difficult question or tries to put you on the spot, don't answer right away. Wait. Count to 3 in your head. Look them in the eye while you do it. This pause does 2 things. First, it gives you time to think, so you don't say something you'll regret. Second, it shows the other person that you are not afraid of them. Only a person who feels safe and powerful is willing to let 3 seconds of dead air happen in the middle of a tense moment. It makes you look thoughtful. It makes you look wise. And most importantly, it makes the other person wonder what you are thinking. A new kind of music. Back at the bar, Elena realized the conversation with Mark had completely changed. Because she wasn't talking so much, she noticed things she usually missed. She noticed that Mark tapped his glass when he was lying. She noticed that he didn't actually ask her about her life because he was interested. He did it because he ran out of things to say about himself. By being silent, Elena had become a mirror. Mark was seeing himself, and he wasn't sure if he liked it. Elena, on the other hand, felt a strange kind of peace. For years, she had felt like she had to perform. She felt like she was a radio that had to be on all the time, playing music for everyone else to dance to. Tonight, she realized she could just be the silence between the notes. Silence isn't empty. It's full of information. It's full of truth. When you stop talking, you start seeing the world as it really is, not as you want it to be. You start seeing who is worth your time and who is just making noise. As Elena walked out of the bar alone, she didn't feel lonely. She felt solid. She didn't feel the need to text her friends and tell them every detail of the date. She didn't feel the need to process it out loud. She kept the night for herself. She